And welcome to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we are going to be chatting a little bit about the fitness industry and maybe some of our pet peeves within it.
Yeah, or just one really big
Just one.
which like anything, like a big umbrella encompasses a lot of stuff. So I think it's gonna encompass a lot, but what the fitness industry is lying to you about. And so we really see this, and you might be somebody who really struggles with feeling like there's always something else out there, or like there's something more that's wrong. And we can kind of like just pull back the curtain today, honestly, and explain like how, at least from a business perspective, we've been taught marketing, and like how it's literally meant to create problems for you that you didn't even know that you had, to make you then kind of go down a funnel of like buying their thing. And some people's intentions and hearts might be in the right place and others are not, and you really just don't know with who is creating the problem and the advertising and the things. But it manifests in things like us as consumers and as people who just want to get freaking healthier, feeling like it's my hormones and now I need this fancy test, or maybe I need this fancy meal plan to go with my hormones. And not just hormones, like I don't want to like harp on only that, but that's a really common one that I'm seeing nowadays. Or that the science behind metabolism is super complex and you need this exact specific type of diet in order to fix your metabolism. And
Or it's your gut health.
yeah, it's your gut, it's your personality type, it's your
Yes. I've seen literally like DNA, like they will in like your
blood
blood
type.
type.
Yep.
Yeah, blood type. That's really big right now. It is fascinating.
Yeah.
Like absolutely fascinating what people will come up with. Or, another it's cortisol, it's this, it's
For
that,
your
it's this.
body type, like the like mesomorph, ectomorph,
Mhm.
like those things, like bringing it back to like when we learned about body types in like freaking health class in middle school or whatever. I don't even know like where that was taught, but I just remember learning that as a kid and being like, that's interesting. And then like they're bringing it back now, and it's like, because of your body type, you should have this kind of diet versus that kind of diet. And there's like the trouble is that there is a little bit, at least of typically, not always, there's a little bit of merit to kind of every like gimmick that is out there. For example, something that I really haven't seen this be marketed, but like different ethnicities have different propensities for tolerance to certain macronutrients, or just resistance to diets as a whole. So, for example, Asians um, actually have, specifically Pacific Islanders, have the slowest metabolisms, and that has evolutionarily become something that has been an issue for them, because it's all the import export. Like you can only have food when it's imported, and so they had to literally adapt over generations to like withstand food famines, like just not having it because you had to import it from ships that aren't as reliable 200 years ago or whatever. And now all those islands are filled with food from all over the place. And that's why like the highest obesity rates are also in like Pacific Islands and Pacific Islanders, is because, and they're like the biggest people, is because of their metabolisms are slow naturally. And now there's a food surplus in their area. And so I find that super fascinating. Or like the genetics of, yeah, just different ethnicities. There's a whole rabbit hole we could go down, but like there's truth to all of that. But it's like when that is then taken and spun on its head to like, now you need to eat exactly this way, is not practical or feasible for most people. And as we know, and what we'll teach you today, the best diet that you could ever go on is the one that you can stick to indefinitely. And so it might not look a certain way, it might not be perfect, it might not follow all the rules and guidelines of something, but if you can stick with it and make progress on it, then it's the right one for you.
Yeah. And I think the big asterisk here is like for most people, it's not your hormones. It's not,
Yeah.
the cortisol. It's not your gut health for most people. Now, for some people, absolutely. Like, for example, if you have celiac and you have
Yeah.
severe celiac, well, like you cannot eat gluten. And like that may not feel super sustainable or realistic, but that's your reality,
But that's a
right?
lot. Yeah.
That's life. And like, I'm sorry, or if you have, a dairy intolerance, like, I
If you're
mean,
physically allergic to a food to the point of death, it's like, well, and it's interesting because
right.
it's like the kids that grew up like deathly allergic to peanut butter, for example. If you have that, it's like you accepted that at a very young age, and then that was it, right? It's just like you just can't have those things. It's not emotional, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. But once you kind of, layer choice into it of like now I have the option and I can or I can't because it's just something that like makes my tummy grumble a little weird. It's like then we can assign all the like morality around food to it that makes it that much more emotional and guilt inducing and shame inducing for being off the diet, quote unquote.
Yeah. So that's that little asterisk. It's like for most people, it's not. For some people, it is. That's your reality. And like, yeah, maybe you do need to do a, intense gut health protocol or, whatever it may be. But the reality is for most people, the answers are simple. The
Yeah.
answers are simple. They don't involve a, person trying to, shell you a whole bunch of supplements and this protocol and this testing and this and that and this. And I think that what happens sometimes is like we just and it can be from marketing or it can be from our past experiences, but we feel like whatever we need to do needs to be really complex and really really difficult in order for us to reach our goals, but it really is just like the simple basic habits that you do day in and day out that are going to help you in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like, I'm even thinking of some people that I know that I really respect that honestly are kind of doing a good thing with the marketing. Like they'll play the marketing card of like it's this hormone, it's that hormone. They have like so much interest from people who believe that they are complicated and they are broken. And then being able to, and this takes a really highly skilled practitioner to take somebody who truly believes that and be able to coach them into and coach them through the fact that like it's really not that. The root of this hormone being off is the lifestyle, is the stress management, is the habits that you have perpetuated for this many decades that no shit that hormone's off, right? And so I think it's really an interesting line. We've talked about this towing this line many many times, but I think it's just like an overall commentary on like the fitness industry is like what is ethics, what is ethical, and what is too far. And it's like you could make the argument that like someone's intentions are in the right place all day, but like at the end of the day, I think you have to look at a mix of the intention and the outcome, right? And it's like, does that person who who has kind of fallen for the marketing of it's this hormone now come out the other end truly benefited, and do they feel benefited in a way that it was like there was integrity throughout the process for what they received, right? They don't feel like they were duped into something, and that's hard because it's an individual experience and you can't control how somebody perceives your intentions. So it's hard, but you can't win 100% of the time, but you just have to do your best. So to all the coaches that listen, like, marketing is a tricky game. Like, we're not trying to point fingers or say you're bad for doing this or using this or whatever. It's like, I play the metabolism card here and there, right? And I think it's just at what level of transparency do you operate at? And like, are you just making sure at the end of the day, like, you are using just truthful information, like truly truthful information? At the end of the day, the answers for 99% of people are very, very simple in terms of what you need to do, no matter how complex the science actually gets, because it does get complex. Like I've gone down the rabbit hole of how complex the science gets, and it makes your head hurt, and it's really insane and frustrating. You can learn about it all day, but it's simple behaviors that create the best outcomes.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to point out, because this is something that we were talking a little bit off air of, is like we've had people that will come in, prospective clients, and then their feedback is, this is too simple. Like this is just too basic. I need something more complex, because they've seen the hormone, the gut health, XYZ. And I think it's really important to point out that simple doesn't always mean easy.
Oh, it definitely doesn't.
That just because something is simple doesn't mean that it's easy. But that's kind of what we've been taught, is that it needs to be complex. And then you have all these people who, instead of focusing on the foundation of health and fitness, and what that journey looks like, they are too focused on like that 1%, or like the 10% details that just don't really matter a whole lot, because it's like, hey, meal timing and supplements are not going to mean shit if you're not sleeping well.
Mhm.
Or if you don't know what a balanced meal looks like, or if you're not eating enough protein, or if you're not walking enough every day. All of those things are really not going to make a difference. And so it's like those people are going to be constantly spinning their wheels, because they're like, I'm just missing like one key piece. And it's like, no, you're just your lifestyle isn't great. Kind of like to your point earlier with the hormones, where it's like, yeah, your cortisol is awful because you don't know how to manage your stress.
Mhm. Yeah. Or even like it's like people can perpetuate this with themselves by looking for that sort of thing, but even
Mm-hmm.
like a coach who isn't, really grounded in this type of evidence-based approach of like just the simplest behaviors adding up to the greatest outcome. Like I remember I was coaching a coach that I don't really know too well, but like I was just coaching this coach on a client, and they were saying that their client wasn't submitting any food logs for the past couple months and they weren't losing weight. And I was like, okay, so like the client needs to submit food logs because we got to know what they're eating, like the basics of just nutrition accountability. Like if they're not logging it, there's more than likely more than what they're saying they're eating going into their body. Point blank, period. Like people, the research shows time and time again that people are awful at self recall. Um, but then the coach was asking me, so this client goes to bed at midnight and wakes up at about 8. So they're getting 8 hours of sleep. But like, is their fat loss going to be impacted by them not going to bed before midnight? And I was like, it doesn't matter. I didn't know how to say it nicely. I was literally like, it doesn't matter. Get the food logs. Like that is going to drive fat loss. And it sounds like they're getting 8 hours of sleep. So this is even more of a non-issue. And I was just like, I this is as nice as I can be. It doesn't matter. Like food logs. And I think the issue was that the coach didn't want to have conflict with the client and like really confront them about like I need this. And so they were trying to find any other reason to like to approach the situation of like it's something else, it's something else. And so like it's what we do with ourselves as the clientele. It's like it's not the simple answer, it's something else, it's got to be something else, right? But simple is not easy. And in fact, the most doing things that are very mundane and repetitive and simple over and over again is actually really hard for us as human beings, because especially in this day and age, we're trained to chase a dopamine hit. We're trained to chase that quick satisfaction. And so it's actually something that I really admire. Aaron and I are both pursuing like really big different fitness goals this year. So like as you know, I'm pursuing CrossFit and he's running. Did I tell you that? He's running an ultra marathon in December.
No, you told me that he had gotten into running, but you didn't tell me
Oh,
he's running an
okay.
ultra. Wow, good for him.
So his goal is a 31 miler in December. And so he's going to do a half in June and then a full one in like October, November for a marathon and then the ultra. But we contrast the goals a lot because it's just topic of conversation all the time. And it's like CrossFit is constantly varied. You're always getting that new skill, that new dopamine hit, that new thing that you need to work on because there's so many different things that you could be getting better at. And in a way, I find it very easy to train for in that. Like, I'm always excited, I'm motivated because it's just like, oh, this is so many different things. And I really admire why he's doing this goal because, I mean, his motivations are a little bit different, but why I would want to do something like that is literally just to train myself to do the same thing over and over and over again. Cause I know I would have a very hard time with that. And I think most people would, which is why most people don't train for stuff like that. And it's literally like against our brain chemistry to want to do really, really repetitive and simple things. And so I think diet and exercise and, like, let's say basics of strength training, people call following a program boring too. It's like that's
Mm-hmm.
also some of the stuff that will get you the best results, is following the same programming week after week after week after week with minimal variation, eating 80% whole foods and balanced meals, and just kind of having your staples and not trying to mix it up too much and just keeping it simple is really hard for people. The common complaint, I hate eating the same thing over and over again. I hate leftovers. I hate repeating my meals. It's like, well, I'm not saying you have to eat like a bodybuilder, but like at a certain point, like all the variety is exhausting. So like maybe just settle with something that's simple and repetitive. So,
I saw something on Instagram. It was so funny. Like someone was like, someone asked me if marriage was hard, and it's like, have you ever tried to figure out what you wanted for dinner, and then tried to figure out with a second person, and they're like, and then you have to do that every single day for the rest of your life. And then sometimes you want to go out to eat, and then you both have to figure out where and what you. And I thought it was just so funny, but yeah, it's like it's going to be mundane, it's going to be repetitive, and it's going to be every single day. And like the other, we talk about how like steps vary and stuff, but like, I mean, you're gonna have to be active. Like there doesn't come a point where you just are like not active anymore. It's like you still got to go on your stupid walks for your stupid mental health and like do those things.
oh yeah, actually I had a really good conversation with one of my clients who I know she will listen to this, the other day over text. And I forget exactly what the context was. She was struggling between, and this is like, it's it's on the same vein. It's a little bit off topic, but I figured I'd just share it. But we were just kind of talking about, like, we're in this final stretch. We need to just stay on course of the boring shit, the same stuff. Like, can we do without this? Can we do without that? Like, we're almost to the goal. And we were kind of just contrasting that with like the battle she's having is, I just want to be done and I just want to live my life and I just want to have these fun things in my diet again. And I kind of challenged that, because the reality of her situation is there's going to have to be a lot of non-negotiables that stay with her forever. Maintaining this weight loss is going to also be tough in a game of sacrifice, just a little bit less. And so I challenged her and I said, um, spitballing, we can discuss more later, but when struggling with those mixed feelings and the ambivalence towards like continuing and finishing out the diet, when we want to enjoy these fun things, we can do a couple of things. Where can we find the middle? Like, where can we maybe, something that she might not do is introduce some variety into the diet of, like, we're tracking macros and we're a little bit restricted, but can we have fun with the recipes a little bit and maybe not eat the same thing every day constantly to stay consistent? So it's like kind of the flip side, but also just, finishing strong, because the faster you get out, the faster you're not fighting those
Hmm.
feelings anymore. But also reconciling the fact that those feelings don't go away after the diet is over. And like, is what you're imagining some free for all that doesn't actually exist in your future, right? It's like, what are the disciplines that you are going to have to choose forever, even when the calorie deficit is no longer? And so it's like, the answer to her forever weight loss problem is boring, not the answer that she wants, mundane, and is going to be a challenge mentally, because it's so simple. It's just keep doing what you were doing, but maybe to just a slightly lesser degree, like turn the dial back from 9 to 7.5, right? And no one wants to hear that. They want to hear, I want to do this quick little meal plan, finish the weight loss and be done, and then go back to normal life and somehow maintain it.
Now there is something to say though, like, if you get down to a certain physique or you have built some muscle mass, it becomes a little bit easier to maintain that physique than it did
Oh yeah.
to get there. So it does feel a little bit easier to maintain, but like you still have to do the work to get to that physique. So I will say that like sometimes it does feel easier, but yeah, to your point, okay, well, I'm still prioritizing protein. I'm still going on walks. I'm still drinking my water. I'm still making sure I'm getting sleep. And I think that sometimes it can be perpetuated a little bit by Instagram influencers, right? Because it's like you see them living their life and it's so much fun and they go out and they eat whatever they want and they drink whatever they want. And it's like, but you also don't see the other 80% of their day or what their diet looks like during the week. And so I think that sometimes can play a little bit into like why they think, oh, I'll just be able to like intuitively eat and just AKA I get to eat whatever I want because it's intuitive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think actually I know somebody who she used to do some admin work on my team that does a good job. She's a fitness coach herself, but she just wanted something that wasn't coaching as like a part-time break from all the coaching, which is cool. But she does a good job on her social media of explaining that the whole intuitive eating thing is not intuitive just eating whatever you want. It's the fact that you track macros for this many years and you pretty much know what the numbers behind every food is, and you can just like eyeball everything and know that you're not in, putting yourself in a pickle. So it's really, yeah, it's a lot of knowledge built up. But I think the the takeaway from this episode, and I think it goes with the title, the fitness industry's biggest lie, is like, whether it's intuitive eating influencers or it's the marketing that it's your hormones and it's cortisol being out of whack that's making you gain weight or whatever, is like really audit who you follow on social media. And I guess it's like, it's really tough to be a conscious consumer and know what works and what doesn't when you have a different history of what has worked and what hasn't for you, right? So like, for example, just before this off air, we were talking about like somebody said, this thing worked for me, so I need to do it again, right? When in reality, if you have to do it again, does it really work for you? Or like, are you looking at it as like a binary means to an end? And I think ultimately it's yeah, it's making sure that your reference point is true. And this is where it's like it's really dicey because everybody's like lived experience is different. But the truth of the matter is the majority of the most successful people that have lost weight, kept it off, and live this lifestyle do boring things over and over again. And success leaves clues. And most of the people that have successfully achieved that and are, posting on social media, sharing a message, are trying to speak against the quick fix type of mentality. And so it's like you have to just look at patterns and trends, but it makes it easier when you've actually like lived it. Like you've done the boring thing, you've seen the results from it, and you understand that from a lived experience. But I think a lot of people who, like the people that we're trying to reach in this episode, unfortunately, are also the people that are going to have the hardest time receiving it because they have the lens of this worked for keto worked for me, Whole30 worked for me, the meal plan worked for me. I just need to do those things again to see results. I just need to be restricted. And they don't have the experience of I did the thing that's in the gray area, the moderate thing, the slow thing, the simple thing for a long period of time and it worked, quote unquote. They typically, the people that we're trying to reach with this episode are people that when they try the slow and steady approach, they just get discouraged because it's not, quote unquote, fast enough compared to whatever their reference point was in the past. And therefore they build up evidence that can't work. They can't have balance and see results long term. And that's what really like hurts me because I'm like, I want you to see this, but you have to live it to see it. And in order to live it, I have to get you to believe it enough to like work with you as a client or like something to like get the momentum going. And then you'll believe it and live it and keep the results forever. But it's kind of a backwards formula. So I see why there is merit to almost dangling the carrot with the marketing a little bit enough to get the bite and then transform the life. So it's like, it's so hard.
Yeah, it is really tough. Yeah. And I think I've talked about this client before where she's done 75 hard and
Mm-hmm.
she saw results. She saw weight loss.
Which, by the
And
way, 75 hard is not a weight loss diet.
yes, it's more of a mental toughness. I don't know how many times we've talked about it on the podcast, but if you do
We
it for
should
the right
just do
reasons,
a whole dedicated episode on it.
yes, we can definitely do that. Um, it's for mental toughness. If you do it for the right reasons, I think it's fantastic. If you're doing it for weight loss, that is not the purpose, and you're setting yourself up for failure. And so this client saw success, I put that in quotations, on 75 hard, and then she went back to kind of like what she was doing before. So it's this all or nothing mentality where it's like I'm either doing 75 hard or I'm doing keto or I'm doing this like crazy intense protocol and I'm seeing rapid weight loss, and then or I'm doing nothing at all because I finished dieting, it sucked, it was really hard, and now I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. So then like we were talking about, it's like it's perpetuated like, oh, but I did this and it worked. So I need to do something hard again in order to see results. And so we have talked about this as well. Like, when we were back in like competition, like bodybuilder, like that lifestyle, we always talk about like prep is hard, but it's also easy. It's really, really easy because there are a set of rules, and there's no gray. It's all black and white. You either like you have to eat your macros or your meal plan or whatever you're on. Like you can't do that. Like you have to. There's no alcohol. Like there's no this, there's no that. Like you have to get your sleep, you have to get your training, you have to do your cardio, and you're saying no to a lot of things. The hard part for a lot of people, and for a lot of different reasons, it's like you go into off season and there's all this gray area now because it's like, oh, I can't have a drink. Or if I go out to a, event, I can't have dessert. Like I could have this, I could have that. And it's really difficult. And then on top of watching your body change, which is really hard, going from like super, super lean to like probably putting on some body fat, because that's realistic. All of these things are really, really difficult. And then you and I have kind of both fallen into like, oh man, I just need to prep again. Like, and it's almost like, because prep is easier. It's like the set of rules. And that's kind of why you and I are drawn to programs like 75 hard, because we like that structure. We like the rules. And so for this client in particular, I was trying to challenge her a little bit because she said, I just need to do 75 hard. And I was like, I think it's because 75 hard is easy for you. And I think that what you're doing right now, trying to find balance and trying to take a like that flexible approach, that's what's hard for you, is you're struggling with the gray area and you want those set of rules because they are easy to follow. And so I was like, even though 75 hard is called 75 hard, that is easy for you. You can be disciplined, you can do these things. And it is that simple, mundane things day after day that don't feel extreme. Like that can feel really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the biggest thing is that, at least with like people like you and I that love to check the boxes and achieve, is when there's rules, there's reassurance. There's
Yeah,
reassurance that
absolutely.
you're doing it right. Right.
Yes. Yes.
The gray area, however, you have to decide. You have
Mm.
to give yourself
Mm-hmm.
permission that you're doing it right enough. And the
Mm.
problem with really high achieving women and people who have high expectations over themselves is that we struggle to give ourselves that validation of, I did enough. And so I think that's where really the gray area is tough, because then we're like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. And we always will default to, it's not enough, so I need to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not productive either. And so we just function better with these rigid rules, because at least I know that I'm a failure or I'm good. And
Yeah.
and while that's incredibly unhealthy and it's not real life and it's not the way that you can truly find any sort of balance long term, it's what we default to because it's easier to understand than giving ourselves credit and validation for things that we're doing pretty well, but not 100% of the way well. Like, doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right. But once you can kind of learn how to live in that gray and just repeat the simple actions and say that is enough consistently over time, that stuff really adds up. And it's just a mind fuck to like actually conceive of
Yeah.
when you're wired so like hardwired for I must achieve, I must succeed. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. But the other thing, again, we had kind of before this, we were talking a little bit, hey, what should we talk about today? And we had talked a little bit about meal plans, and I know this is a little off topic, but just kind of like where the conversation is headed. So with coaching, like we like the rules and the structure and feeling like we're doing good and certain things like that. But I think that sometimes there's some sort of misconception when you hire a coach because you feel like, oh, they're going to do things for me. And it's true to an extent, right? Like we're going to help you, we're going to try to figure things out, but at the end of the day, a good coach is going to try to give you autonomy, right? They're going to try to give you the skills and the tools and the knowledge for you to be successful on your own. And so something like 75 hard or keto, like that doesn't really teach you anything. Doesn't give you any tools or any knowledge. And so with coaching, like we were talking a little bit about like meal plans and stuff. Um, Meal plans feel easy because it's like, here's this thing, follow it, you get results, and that's it. And so like we've talked a little bit about like, well, we can help you create one. Like we can help you through this process. Like we can help you do these things. But like when you hire a coach, it's not like you have to turn your brain off completely. It's like it is nice to have that reassurance, but at the end of the day, like we do want you to feel like you can function on your own after having worked with us.
yeah. And if anything, you just need to turn your brain on in a different way. Like
Yes.
it's not I'm constantly, and this is what I see all the time, is it's not I'm constantly searching Pinterest and YouTube and Instagram for ideas and solutions and constantly feeling overwhelmed by all of the ideas and solutions that I could be doing and then not taking action on any of them because I don't know which one is the best one. And I need to make the right decision. So I don't make any decisions at all. And then I'm just stuck in the same place and hard on myself for not making any progress. So that's where like you sit before with your brain, and your brain is not actually doing any meaningful work. It is just getting gassed out. And what your brain is doing when you hire a coach is, oh, my coach asked me this question to reflect on my behaviors or my choices. How do I actually feel about that? Here's answering one question at a time, reflecting on one thing at a time, and getting really valuable feedback of like, oh, like now I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about education of nutrition and the process. And that is very useful work with your mind. And it feels like way less because it is. And also because it's directed. It's like you're taking all the thoughts and the chaos that I imagine is like, if you just imagine a cloud of like pencil scribbles above your head, that's what the first thing that I described. And if you just funnel that down into like one little tube and it's going in one direction towards your goals. And that is what coaches allow you to do. It's not that you're not thinking or working or processing, but it's directed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You like that
So
description? That's perfect.
yes.
I've gotten really, I've had like literally the people that I've been talking to lately and the clients we've been bringing on, like it's all the same, exact same issues over and over and over again. So I feel like I've got the whole, like I've read your mind down.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like it. And so I think it's like, yeah, it's like still being active in your journey, but just in a different way. Um, but yeah, but again, and this is all to say again, like, and I think the other thing I'm like bringing it all back because this is not to say that like, that something like a gut health protocol or hormones or something wouldn't be useful for you because in some cases there are like we have a client in particular who on paper everything is perfect, right? Like doing the macros, doing the sleep, and everything, and she's not seeing results. And so it's like, okay, we have all the basics down, but something is not working, something is not clicking. So there might be an underlying issue. And I
Mhm.
think that that's when you can start to search for some other things. That's when it's like, hey, let's see what's going on in, different areas, like where, what is your cycle like? What is this like? What are some other symptoms that you're having? Let's do a blood panel. Like, let's see if there's anything else going on. Like, that is the time to start implementing what are some other things that might be at play that are holding us back, because on paper everything should be moving. We should be seeing progress. So again, that's not to say that these things are just like snake oil, because they absolutely are true for certain people. Like, it could be like you're not really going to see any progress because you got SIBO, but like, so there's a lot of other things to consider.
Yeah.
So definitely want to throw that out there. But then I think that sometimes it's tough with those coaches because they're almost a little bit biased towards
Yeah.
the method and so they're like kind of searching for things.
Yeah.
So
And in
I don't
reality,
know.
yeah, well, because in reality, the the foundational things like sleep, water, nutrition, like eating foods that agree with you, fruits, vegetables, protein, strength training, stress management, lifestyle management, all makes the gut, the hormone stuff better and mutes symptoms a little bit from wherever they are when you first begin your journey and say you're eating a lot of processed foods or your stress is all over the place. It's like all the symptoms that you have with whatever condition you might actually have would be way worse with those foundations being off. So a lot of times it's like, okay, tackle the foundations. Where do we fall from there? And a lot of really good hormone coaches and people who market that stuff that I know do it that way is like they're going to use the marketing tool and they're going to talk about your hormonal condition and all that. But when you get in there, you're going to work on the foundations because that alone can really improve your quality of life and also your mental clarity to take on whatever the next protocol might be. And then if you're still having issues or there's things that just get in the way of you being able to execute those habits, then okay, that's where a little bit of supplementation can come in. That's where a protocol that's more specific or rigid or restrictive comes in because maybe you actually have bacterial overgrowth in your gut. And that is a real thing. And so it's not to say they don't exist, but it's that you have to hit the low hanging fruit before you go like all into the 1% details of things because sometimes the low hanging fruit actually solves the problem and sometimes it doesn't. But you don't know until you figure that out. And I think it's a disservice to throw the crazy protocol at someone off the bat.
Yeah. So I think that kind of leads to another question that we didn't think about addressing, is like, okay, how long do we do the basics before we might need to, okay, something might be wrong, like, or not wrong, but there might be something off somewhere else that we need to look into.
That's really hard.
Hmm.
At least my thought on it is like, it's hard to put a specific timeline on it, but like I would say, for example, like our beginning program for most people is about 4 months, and I'd say that's like a long enough time, but like short enough as well to where it's like we could really work on those things for like 4 months, and if at the end of 4 months they're either like still really struggling with like adherence because their gut is giving them so many crazy wacky symptoms or they just like have so many intrusive thoughts and anxieties and things that like sometimes like literal chemical neurochemical balance in your brain can be off due to micronutrient deficiencies and things like that, um, to where like even something as simple as a really high quality B complex vitamin can, for this is just one example, can help with methylation rates in your brain and therefore your ability to stay focused on things, not be quite as distracted or jumping around or like kind of ADHD-y. That is or impulsivity, like that is a literal thing that like can be impacted by micronutrient deficiencies. And so like is somebody's adherence, and this is where it gets really dicey, is it because of they is it because of like things they can control or is it something that's out of their control? And you can't just tell someone that like it's in your control, you can do it, and or it's not. Like you just kind of have to try and try and try and try and see. And at a certain point, it just might make more sense to try the supplement out of like, add that in. Does it help? Okay. Then can we take more steps forward from there? So I don't think there's any right or wrong answer in my opinion, but like just grading the approach, and just honestly, if we're seeing forward momentum, I'll keep going at the rate that we're going. But if we're stuck, then I'll kind of keep troubleshooting so that we try to take a step forward. But I know it's not a direct answer.
No, and I don't think there is. Like, there's not like, oh, okay, it's been 8 weeks, therefore I need to start looking. It's like, considering all the other different factors of that client, and then also really taking into consideration, well, what is their history with dieting like, and like how much are we trying to kind of undo, and how much time has been spent not in the basics. But it's like, if you've been doing what you need to do, you've been doing it for a while, and like things are not moving, and you've kind of exhausted like all avenues, it's like, okay, yeah, let's kind of take a peek. And I think for me, it's like, even if we look at blood work and everything is good, it's like, okay, that's one thing we can kind of rule out, and move on to something else, and kind of start looking at those different areas. But I know that one of the issues that we run into sometimes as coaches is like, sometimes we don't want to suggest blood work, or we don't want to suggest something because we don't want the client to think that something is wrong with them,
Yeah.
or that.
Cool.
Right, right. So that can be tough. And so it's kind of finding that balance between like, hey, like you are in control, and like you can do a lot for you. But then, yeah, there are some times where like we have some clients who, they need supplemental estrogen, or they need testosterone, like because like they're doing everything and their body is just not producing enough of what they need, and they do need to supplement. So
Yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Um,
No black and white, as we always say.
yeah, but hopefully you kind of go through and audit a little bit of what you're consuming, and just kind of having a little bit of skepticism, I guess,
Mhm.
or like kind of like looking further into things when you're scrolling through Instagram or whatever it may be, and also kind of taking a deep dive into you, and seeing like, what can I control, what are some things that I might be able to do a little bit better, and go from there.
Love it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, guys, hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Christy Lynn Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and hope to see you back next week.